my name is Jackson Ellis. I work for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. So a little bit about what we do. We basically manage the wildlife. So deer, turkeys, basically any birds, mammals, any wildlife. We manage those populations. We make sure that they don't get too high, that they don't get too low, that we're maintaining habitat for them so that they have food, water, space, and cover for them to survive. So that's what we do. Specifically, I work with hunter education. So I make sure that when people go out hunting and fishing, that they're being safe and that everybody gets to enjoy their time outdoors. So I'm an archer. I love bows and arrows. I do a lot of my hunting with bows and arrows. So if you could see my office, it's full of ducks and deer and stuff like that. You can actually see one over my head right there. So that's what I do and what I enjoy doing. So hopefully a little bit of myself will rub off on you guys here, and you guys might become archers. So bows and arrows are extremely neat to me. I'm kind of a history guy as well. I love history, and bows are history. They are part of human history. So bows and arrows date back thousands of years, at least 10,000 years, if not older, that we start seeing bows and arrows showing up in hieroglyphics in Egypt and Africa, and stuff and places like that. So it goes back way before the Americas, way even before Native Americans, but actually in the old world. So they were used for a multitude of things. First and foremost, they were established for hunting, for gathering food. So the people could survive and thrive. And then they became a staple in warfare, and now it's even a sport. So if you guys watch the Olympics, I'm sure everybody loves watching the Olympics. And during the Summer Olympics, we have archery competitions. So we both boys and girls participating in these sports. If anyone's interested in archery, there's lots of places for you to experience it. The chances are that there's an archery range around you. So if this activity piques your interest and you want to try the full size thing, if you've done the mini bow and you want to try the full size one, there's lots of places for you to get that experience, and maybe you'll become an archer like myself. So there's different pieces and parts of bows and arrows, but for the most part, they are very simple. And we're going to make a very simple bow here. So this is what's called a long bow. So basically, we're going to be making a long bow today, but just a little one. So basically, there's a grip in the middle, and then there's two limbs. So there's a lower limb and an upper limb. It's connected to the grip there. Our bow is just going to be one limb, but basically the limb is what it's a piece of wood, or now they're making them out of fiberglass, but basically it flexes. So we talked a little bit about how it's important for that bow and arrow to flex, and I've got my little one right here. You can see I've got my limbs here. All right, so my upper limb and my lower limb. All right, and then my grip is just kind of imaginary. I just hold it there in the middle. All right, and then we've got our string. So the string connects to the tops of the limbs. All right, and that's it. There's not much to it. So it's pretty neat that something so simple can have such an impact on human history. So next is the arrow. So this is what actually flies down range to our target, hopefully. So we've got basically 5 pieces to our arrow. If we start at the back, we've got our nock. So the nock is what connects the bow string to the arrow itself and holds it on there. And then we've got our fletching. So for those of you who have done archery before, do you know what the fletching does? Maybe Ms. Janovich can pick on somebody.
Jack, can you come up closer so he can hear you?
Isn't the fletchings like they have like a certain color, then you want to match the color of like where it's with the knot to like attach it?
Excellent. Yeah, so yep, so you are right. So we have, you can see here, there's 3 fletchings on this arrow here. There's 2 black ones and a blue one. The blue one's facing us. So when we knock our arrow onto our bow, If we were doing this, with a full size bow, we would want to make sure that that odd vein, so that's that blue in here. We got 2 black and then our odd one is blue. We would want to make sure that that one faces away from the bow. That way, when it comes off the bow and we shoot it, the fletching doesn't contact the bow, it doesn't hit the bow and shoot that arrow off in a weird direction. So that's key when you go to shoot archery. But the purpose of the 3 fletchings, like if we didn't have these on the bow here or on the arrow itself, it wouldn't fly straight. So I've got an example here. I'll show you guys. This is one of my personal arrows. All 3 of mine are white, but I've got one marked. You can see with this number here so that I know which one goes up. All right. Then as it comes off the bow, the arrow spins because of the vanes. So as it flies through the air, that arrow spins, the vanes spin the arrow. Now, does anybody know why we would want our arrow to spin? Why wouldn't we want to just fly through the air?
Go for it, Andrew.
I think it would be because otherwise without those, it wouldn't fly straight and it wouldn't go up or it wouldn't go straight. It would go up or down. You're
absolutely right. Exactly. So it's all about accuracy. So what these vanes do is they grab the air. All right. They actually contact. If you think about, there are particles in the air and that spins the arrow and it makes it more accurate. So if we didn't have that, our arrow would be kind of wobbling through the air like this, and that's not going to be very accurate. It's not going to go exactly where we want it to go, especially at further distances. So the vanes are very important for our bow to be accurate, for us to hit what we're aiming at. So today our Q-tips are not going to have a vane. All right, we're just going to have our kind of soft tip. We're going to have the backside. We're going to call our knock. And then the middle piece is called the shaft. So the shaft is the long piece here on my arrow. It's this black piece here. All right. And then we've got our tip. So most tips are either just kind of pointed like this for target archery, for shooting into targets and for practicing. And then if we were actually, let's see here, if we were actually going hunting, we would use something like this, something that's sharp and has a blade to it. But for today, all we're worried about is this soft little tip here. So basically the way this works is when you guys have got your soaked popsicle sticks, I'm going to get one here and I'm just going to make one up for you guys. So it's going to look like this. It's going to be nice and soft. You'll have your notches there on both ends of the popsicle stick. All right. So the string will attach at these points right here. So you can decide which end you want to be, the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. That's your personal decision. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to decide what is the front side and the back side. And we're going to kind of start bending just very lightly. We don't want to break it, but we just want to start to get that bend. All right. So instead of our popsicle stick being flat, it's going to start to have that curvature to it like a bow and arrow. So you'll see that it's already started. All right. It's starting to take that shape. So we've got our front of our arrow or our bow, the back of our bow, and we just kind of slowly and easy, just really make it malleable and so that it kind of starts to get that shape. All right. And once you kind of got a shape started, we'll start with our string. Okay. So we sent you guys way more string than you're going to need. So what your teacher will do is they're going to cut you off a piece. Ms. Janovich, I would say about a foot. I know in the instructions it said maybe 6 inches, but it's actually going to be easier if they get about a foot of string. So when we've decided what is now, we've kind of got our bow shape, and we'll decide what is the top and the bottom of our bow. Again, not super important or key that one or the other is the top or the bottom. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that string and you're going to place it in the notches. Okay. And you're going to tie a knot just like that first knot when you go to tie your shoes. Okay. Very simple. You're just going to go over. All right. And then through the loop and then tighten it down with that string. And it doesn't matter if you have a lot of extra. You'll see, I'll show you here once I get this tied. You're going to want on the first knot, we're actually going to do that twice. So you're going to take and do one, what we call an overhand knot. Okay. And I've got probably about an inch of string hanging off there. You can see I've got the one knot tied already. Okay. And then you're going to tie a second knot, and that's going to secure it down to that bow, that knot on the bow, and allow us to start to flex the bow a little bit more. Okay. So I'm going to tie this second knot. And now you'll notice that my knot, and I'll show you here, the knot is actually off to one side. So it's going to be kind of closer to one side or the other. It's not going to be right in the middle. And that's kind of what we want, because eventually when we go to shoot that bow, we're going to actually want the string on one side or the other. Okay. So once we've got our top one on here, you can kind of pull on it and make sure that it's tight. And again, not too tight, or not too hard. You don't want to bust the wood on the bow. String the bow down, all right, into that next notch. And once we get it down to that notch, we can kind of hold it in there and pull that string down and flex that bow. So now my string is tight. I've got it in one end of the notch, and I'm going to wrap my string around that notch a couple of times while I'm cinching down my bow. So I'm actually pulling on it, and then once I get my bow into the shape, I wrap it around. All right, so I'm going to wrap it around the notches at the bottom of my bow about 4 times. Okay, so I've got it wrapped around 4 times, and now I can even let go, and this bow holds its shape. Okay, I am going to tie 2 knots though. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to do the same exact thing, same exact knot that I did on the bottom one. So I'm going to just tie that loop. It takes a little bit of dexterity, so don't worry if you don't get it on the first one. It's not the end of the world. And then once I've got that knot tied, I'll do it one more time. So again, 2 knots on the top, 2 knots on the bottom, just like so. And then our bow is secure. Now you'll notice you've got a little bit of a tag end of string up here and a tag end on the bottom. No big deal. We're just going to take a pair of scissors, cut those off. Be careful not to cut your string or the knot itself. And now we've got our bow made. All right. You'll see if you look straight along the back here, my string is actually closer to one side. So you see my string is basically off the side here. That's the side that you're going to want to knock your arrow on. Okay, so I've got my Q-tip arrow, and I'm going to knock it on the side of the bow here. I'll show you, just like so. All right, you're going to place that back end of the arrow on the string. You can kind of hold it on with your fingers like so, and you pull it back, you release it, boom, and I hit my target. You got to take my word for it, but I hit my target. All right. So the cool is we can shoot them many, many times. All right. If you do, try not to pull it way back, because eventually once it starts to dry, okay, it's going to hold its shape. And if you pull it back way too far, it'll kind of weaken the bow basically. We want our bow to be flexible. The reason is, and I'll show you here, when we pull back our bow, oh, and I dropped it. When we pull back our bow string, our limbs. So you can see those limbs flex, all right? And as they flex, what they're doing is they're storing energy. So there's kind of a physics lesson now. So as we store our energy, we can store more as we pull it back, but then it's not always going to want to jump forward into that same position, okay? So we want to just barely get it back enough to hold some energy, and then we release it, okay? Now, if you were ever to do this with a real bow and arrow, so if you were at an archery range, okay, we never want to do what's called a dry, okay? So a dry fire is when you pull the bow back without an arrow on the string and you release it. That's very hard, very hard on the bow. It's It's very, very hard on all the equipment, and actually it can be dangerous. Well, the biggest thing is to remember is to just get a little bit of flex in that bow. So once you've got your wetted popsicle stick, just kind of work it in your fingers really easy to get that flex, okay? And you'll start to get that shape. Once you get that shape, 2 knots on top, just simple overhand knots like the first knot on when you're tying your shoes. And then you can flex your bow a little bit more as you pull that string down into the second grooves, okay? And then we wrap it. Once we get that shape, we pull it down, get it into one of the notches, and then we secure it with 4 wraps. So 1, 2, 3, 4 times around. And then we do 2 knots, just like we did on the top, on the bottom. All right.
And the knot should be on the same side of the stick,
Yep.
like
And then
stacked on top of each other.
Yep. I'll get this up here again. But yeah, basically you're going to have those. You want to keep them on one side. So you can see I've got them on one side there, both those knots. Okay.
Okay.
If there was a knot on one side and then one knot on the other, you'd kind of have the string going diagonal across the back of the bow. And that's not the end of the world. It would still work, but it's not going to be quite as accurate. Okay. And then when you go to actually shoot your arrow, you want to keep that arrow on the side of the bow that the string is. So I'll kind of got to flip it around here because I'm not a lefty. But basically like that. So you can see my strings on that side. I'm going to knock my arrow on that side as well. And then we shoot it. All right. The key to being an accurate archer is consistency. Okay. So you want to pull it back about the same amount each time. You want to knock that arrow in the same location each time. So you want to try to get it right in the middle. Okay, so right, if you imagine the top of the string and the bottom of the string, you want to knock it right in the center. All right. And that'll keep you more accurate. So any questions or comments at this time?
I'm a lefty. I write with my left, but I do everything else with my right hand. So which side would I put the knots on?
Probably you would have it on, let me think about this, on the left side of the bow. That way when you're holding the bow with your left hand, you're going to draw it with your right. And ideally that string and that arrow are going to be on the left side of the bow.
Okay.
Yep. Well,
Andrew?
before you walk away, do you happen to know which eye is dominant?
I think it would be my left.
Okay. So you can actually, if you have somebody help you, there's a neat tool you can do to find out which eye is dominant, because just like you have a dominant hand, all right, you can also, everybody has a dominant eye. And when you're doing sports or activities, and archery in particular, where hand-eye coordination is really important, you want to know which eye is dominant. So one thing you can do, and this is a good activity to do before you actually go out and practice with your bows, is to find out which eye is dominant. So you'll pick a partner. One of you will make a triangle basically with your hands. You guys can hold it up in front of you like so. All right. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at your partner and you're going to look at their nose in between that diamond. And you're going to pull back and they're going to look and they're going to see which eye you bring that back to. So you want to keep focused on their nose and then slowly bring it back, and you'll bring it back to your dominant eye.
Okay.
So that's a neat little activity that you guys can do to figure out which eye is dominant. And you may be left-handed, but right eye dominant, be flip-flopped. So just
Very
something
neat.
to keep in.
What is your background? How did you end up with the Parks Department?
Oh, great question. So sounds similar to Andrew. I was a fishing fool when I was a kid. I did a lot of fishing. My grandpa got me started in hunting when I was about 8 years old. But I just love to be outside. I grew up on like a small acreage with horses. My mom was a horse lady, and so we had a kind of a creek and a little forest in our backyard, and that's what got me hooked on the outdoors. In school I really loved science. I loved biology. So learning all about the different ecosystems. And then when I went to college, I got a degree in fisheries and wildlife with an emphasis in conservation. So that I started working for the Game and Parks part-time as an intern when I was in college. And when I graduated, I took an entry-level position and have worked through 2 different positions since I've been here. All right. Well, hey guys, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being a great class. I really like to hear that some of you already have some experience with archery. That's very cool. And if you don't, I hope you give it a try and maybe you'll find a new hobby.
Thank you so much. What do you say, fourth grade?
Thanks, guys.